Hey, what's going on everyone? This is Mike Kollin at MikeKollin.com. I am the meta to the meta. I'll explain that in a second. So, one of the things we do on this channel is, for the most part, most of these videos are very, very vague and very abstract processing and abstract thinking. It's very right brain. So for a lot of people who are not right brain, it's probably going to be very hard to follow this channel. I would say most of my videos, especially the earlier ones about 4 or 5 years ago on narcissist abuse, I think I broke them down pretty good for the majority of people. Maybe not extremely left brain people, but people that were left of center and just to the right of center and even further to the right. I think majority of people could probably understand those. What I'm really saying is this is going to be a very vague and abstract big picture video. The name of the song is In Dreams by Scott Buckley. By the way, the music will go down in about a minute. Okay, so I'm going to read you the definition of the word meta. So meta comes after the Greek prefix and preposition meta, which means after or beyond. When combined with words in English, meta often signifies change or alteration, as in the word metaphoric or metabolic. So in the term, we're looking at the term in the Greek term which means after or beyond. So that's what we're focusing on right now. Now, going meta allows you to create change, to see, it's like opening up the box and allowing you to take whatever's inside it and take it out and to expand it, to change it, to unlimit it. A lot of the techniques I'll use with you during our session will allow you to pop up and see the meta or the bigger picture. The challenge when most people are stuck is they are stuck in the details. It's literally like, let's say you got a brand new carpet and you get on your hands and knees and you look all the way down, you find this little tiny speck of dirt, but then you put a microscope over it and you put your eye over the microscope, and all of a sudden that little tiny speck looks like the whole entire floor. When it's not. In fact, it's so small, if you actually stand up or even pull your head away from the microscope, you can't even see it. So most of the clients, when they come to me, I will use a series of techniques to pop them out, up and out of their problem. See, here's what happens. When you go up higher and higher and higher, the problem is not only small, but then you can see the solutions around the problem. And that's what most people never get to. So instead, they're stuck on the problem and the very finite detail of it, which means you're going further to the left brain, which means your focus, your literal physical eyes are getting narrow, the pupils are getting narrow, and they're coming together like they're aiming at a target, and they can only see that little dot on the target. They can't even see the bigger target, okay? So now you're stuck. What I'm going to do is I help you to expand up and out and to pull away. And when you pull away and go further up away from the problem, all of a sudden solutions are all over the place. They're on the left, they're on the right, they're in the front, they're in the back. All around the problem, there are solutions. And then it becomes not like, well, how do we fix this problem? It's like, okay, which solution do we want to use that best fits our purpose? So people that tend to be very successful in life, who are very solution oriented, they are doing this. They either took a class, a course, or here's one thing that will develop this in you. When I was a kid, I did two things. I used to build puzzles. I used to put puzzles together. One of the things we would do, we started out with like the big pieces, and then we started, it would have like 80 pieces per puzzle. Then we'd go to like 200 to 250, and each piece gets smaller and smaller. And so what it's doing is it's exercising the left and right brain. So it's transversing or bringing the information from left to right. So you're beginning to open that door. You're beginning to add flexibility to the ability to shift from left to right. So what happens is when you go up higher number, like 400, 500, even 800 pieces, 1,000 pieces per puzzle, etc., Your brain is really beginning to develop the ability to amalgamate, to connect the pieces together to build up to the bigger picture. So you're going down into the details, building up to the bigger picture. So another thing that I did as a child that also I actually learned this during the NLP trainings when they're talking about vague and abstract and right brain processing and all this stuff. Another way that you can do that is put together models, like model airplanes, those little ships, the battleships. You get the pieces, you glue them together, you connect the pieces. I remember the first time I connected this model, it was scary. It was overwhelming. My brain was like, whoa, because there was a lot of pieces to it. I'm like, I don't know how I'm going to do this. So I followed the instructions step by step. And about halfway through, my brain just kind of saw it. Like all the pieces started to fall together, fall into place mentally. And from that point on, I got addicted. So I started getting bigger pieces and, bigger models and airplanes and more complicated with more parts like engine parts and this and that. And all of a sudden, putting the pieces together became a natural process for me. If you are a parent and you want your child to develop right brain functioning, have them put together pieces of the puzzle during, say, Christmas break, summer. Buy it for them and tell them if they do it, say, all right, break it apart and do it again. And then get them a little bit more complicated ones, meaning more pieces. The other one is get them model airplanes and model battleships and, whatever, to put things together. It develops this part of their brain. Another very, very important thing is to get your children into music, into choir, into playing an instrument, learning music notation. They don't have to become a master, but they do have to do it for a few years, probably a little bit more. Like they have to do one art, say choir, for 5, 6, 7, 8 years. It'll be a really good exercise for them to develop the right brain. Another thing is have them take art classes, especially at elementary, middle school, and high school levels. Now, we moved to Wisconsin when I was just after first grade, so I started second grade in Wisconsin, and it was huge on art. You had an art class every semester, and you were in choir every semester, and then you had music theory every semester. And then we moved back to Napa, California. I had choir every semester, and then I had art class every semester. Now, this actually did something for me without me even realizing what was happening. It was developing my right brain, which is the social brain. So my social skills were developing without me even realizing it. I don't even want to say it is the appreciation of art. But you begin to use both sides of the brain is what I'm saying, and that's a major advantage in life. So I'll give you an example of what it did for me. When I went to college, one of the requirements was you had to take a speech class, right? And I didn't take it in high school, so I just said, I got to get it over with. I jumped in. I picked up pretty fast, but then there was something that happened. The teacher was like, Michael, you're really, really good at this. I'm like, I am? In the beginning, I wasn't, but once I got a hold of it, everything clicked, and I started doing really, really well. And I was quite comfortable talking. Because the right brain is the brain that amalgamates and puts the pieces of speech together in a coherent manner. Now, the left brain it's the organization part of the brain that will put the words specifically correctly into place, but it's the right brain that puts the thoughts together. It's like putting the pieces of the puzzle together. Now, what happened was she'd asked me to be on the argument and debate team, and I was really like, no, I do not like to argue. Well, long story short, she did convince me, but there's something else she had me do. She had me show up at lunch, and we would meet in this classroom, and it was like a competition, and it was a really quick thing too. You picked a thing out of the bag, like the subject, and so one side had to be pro, the other side had to be anti or against it, right? So kind of like lawyers. And so what ended up happening was the first 2 days I was like, oh, I can't do this. This was like confusing because you only had, I think it was 3 minutes or 5 minutes to write down notes on what you're going to say. It's like literally they give you a subject, that's it. They start a clock and you got to write the stuff down. Teacher goes, time's up, flip them over. You have to flip it over and stop looking. And so then the other person goes and he goes, okay, well, blah, 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 and they start reading off these quick notes that they made. Well, I don't even think it was 5 minutes. It might have been 3 minutes. So what happened was I learned how to do an impromptu outline at the drop of a hat. So what happened was we slowed it down the third time I went there and said, here's what we're doing. Like, here's the subject. What I want you to do is write down 3 to 5 main subjects underneath that, and then underneath each of those you write 3 to 5 bullet points. I was like, okay. Now the first time we did it, I remember she gave me 5 minutes, okay, but then as we got into it, went down to like 3 minutes. So for the first one I did, it was almost like the first couple of days of speech. When you had to give a speech, I was just reading off these notes that I wrote, and it kind of sucked. I never looked up, and then what happened was I kind of caught on. It's like, oh, wait a minute. I don't have to write out the full sentence. I just need to write down 1 or 2 words per bullet point, or 3 words. And then it got to the point where I could have the subject, and then the 3 main sections, and then even then I'd only have to write 1, 2, or 3 like bullet points, but with 1 word. So let's say there's a category, and then there's three main pieces underneath that I'm going to write. I'm like, well, that's the picture I have to tell them. I have to paint this picture and fill it in, right? So I could literally write 2 to 3 bullet points underneath that, maybe 5 at most, and I would know exactly what I'm going to say, and I could talk forever. Now let's take this video right here. I have one image in my mind. This is what inspired this entire video, as it does almost all of it. All the videos I do. What I'm trying to lead up to, I'm going to kind of cheat and skip ahead, is I'm going to explain what God really is and what angels are, and why contrast is so important. That's it. I didn't even write it down. It's an image in the back of my head, and that's the direction I'm going in. That's why I'm breaking all these pieces down right now. So I don't even have to write down the main bullet points with sub-bullet points underneath that anymore. I don't even know what the title is going to be. I'm going to make the video, and then afterwards I'm going to listen to it and go, oh, what should I call this? And something stands out. I'm like, oh, I'm going to call the video that. So because of all that work I did in building the puzzles, the little like battleships and the model cars and gluing them together, and doing all the artwork and the choir work, it allowed me to really use my right brain a lot, which is the brain that amalgamates, which is essentially what I just talked about. Like, this is amalgamation. You're taking a big picture, like look at the picture right now, and you're going to get each piece of the puzzle, say the flower on the right, and you're going to break it down into 7 or 8 pieces, and you're going to describe each piece in detail. Then you do the left one, then you do her hair, her eyes, her nose, her lips, the little jewelry piece that goes down onto her forehead, and then the glowing thing behind. So now that I have this image, I just talk about the image. That's literally all I'm doing. Now this video is going to take a turn. We're going to go back to meta in a little bit. I will give you this. Because of the classes I took in the past, because of all the exercises I did in the past, it allows me to understand and to go very, very, very meta, to the point where people who are teaching meta look at me like, wait, how did you go there? Okay, so here it is. So this was a different training. It was another 5-week training. It was in Southern California in oh God, it's near Huntington Beach. God, what was the name of that? Not Corte Madera. That's where I live. So Costa Mesa in Southern California. Another one was at Laguna Beach, which was very nearby. So he was explaining a very, very big, vague, and abstract picture to some of the techniques that we do. And this person's name is John Overdurf. He's an NLP trainer's trainer. Actually, he's what's called an NLP master trainer. So he is the person who trains the trainers. Okay, the trainers are the people that train the NLP trainers. Okay, so we're in this class, and it's like, I mean, there was a lot of people. I think it was like 400, 500 people. Maybe more. I think that was the one where we had 1,000 people. But regardless, it was a large class with a lot of doctors, a lot of PhDs, a lot of psychologists, etc. And he was talking about going to the meta. So one of the deals, that you do is, if someone is stuck in a problem, they're stuck in the details. What you have to get them to do is go to the meta of what that problem is. In other words, rise one step above and then go to the meta to that and the meta to that, right? So John was talking about meta on a much, much further abstract level. So instead of it being on an issue or a problem, he was talking about how we function. So one of the things that has always kind of been curious or puzzled scientists, doctors, is like, where do the thoughts come from? Who creates that? Well, my thinking brain does. Like, yeah, but who's behind that, creating that? So you know how thoughts come out of nowhere? That's what we were talking about. And so John says, well, what we do is it's like, let's go to the meta of what that is. So when I speak, it's exactly like God when he pulled in, I always get I think it was Moses. I always get Moses and Noah mixed up. But it's when he called him in and said, hey, you're going to go speak to the Pharaoh and you're going to tell him to free my people. And Moses was like, wait, me? Because Moses had a really, really bad stuttering problem. And God said, I will speak through you. So if you want to get rid of stuttering, it's actually quite easy. All you have to do is get out of the thinking part of your brain and go to the meta and go to the vague and abstract. And all of a sudden, words literally come up. Now I'm touching my belly and my chest area. Words come up from your heart and from your soul or your solar plexus, and they just come out of your mouth. So when I speak, I'm essentially not doing any thinking at all. So stuttering is just you're stuck in your forehead, you're stuck in your frontal lobes, and you're thinking, you're overthinking every little detail. That's all stuttering is. When you get someone to stop doing that, stuttering goes away and they start to talk normal. So while I was in this class, I got to the point to where after about a week, it wasn't very long, I got to the point where I had the subject and then I put like 3 main points. And then I could put one word for each bullet point. It was really like just a skeleton outline, really simple. And I would win the competition every single time, hands down. There's no question about it. And it was simply because I put down the words like, I know what I want to say. It's this picture. And I started realizing it was pictures in my mind, like the picture you're looking at right now. I would just describe the picture in detail. This is literally what I'm doing right now. I have no notes, not even a bullet point. There's nothing. Now, mind you, I was the youngest person in the class. Everyone else was about 35, 40, 45, 50, 51, 52, 55 years old. I was 20, man, it was before my awakening, so I was probably about 25 or 26 years old approximately. Now, John is talking about going meta to where these thoughts come, so that you have your thinking brain, then you have your unconscious mind. But where does it come from? What is creating these thoughts that just come to you? Then he goes, well, we'll just go to the meta. So he goes, and we go like, so I think he asked the question, for what purpose? So one of the techniques that I'll use with you is I'll ask that question, say, well, what's your purpose for coming to me? Or like, what's your problem? You say, well, I have a problem, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, well, what's your purpose for having that problem? You're like, well, what's my purpose? What? I'll just answer the question. I'm like, well, I guess the purpose is blah, blah, blah. I'm like, oh, okay, so what's your purpose for that? And you go, uh-huh. And right there, you can see them breathe deeper. Their belly relaxes, their muscles relax, the tension's starting to melt away. And like, well, the purpose, and you can hear their tone. Their voice goes from being, well, the purpose, to, well, and their eyes, the pupils dilate. Just 2 times, 2 levels of going up. And then they answer that question, and then I'm like, what is your purpose for that? And they're like, wow. And they usually take a deep breath, and they're like, man, well, my purpose for that is blah, blah, and they start speaking freely. Another technique is called timeline therapy that I do. The whole thing is it gets you visually to imagine floating up above the room, the ceiling, up above the building, all the way up in the clouds. You go so far up, you go so meta, you're completely dissociated and disconnected from the problem, and now all these thoughts and ideas and these answers and solutions come to you. So people like Elon Musk, people that are on a high level that always seem to find answers, they've learned some kind of technique, whether it was in a class, maybe they put model airplanes together like for 10 years when they were a kid. They did something that taught them how to do this, even if it's unconscious. Meaning, maybe it wasn't something they learned in math class or from some like engineering course or something. Maybe it was just something hobby they had when they were a kid that they did every single day for years and years and years. And because of that, they unconsciously developed this ability to to go up into the meta, the vague and abstract, and pop out of the problem. And all of a sudden, and you'll hear people say, I don't know, I just kind of forget about the problem. I walk away from it. Like my pastor said, I'd till my garden and I'd pull the weeds out, and then the answers would come. So people have different ways of accessing this part of their mind. And a lot of times they're just like, oh, I didn't realize, all I know is when I go do this thing, the answers almost always seem to come while I'm doing it or shortly after. So John's sitting up in front talking to the class, and I was kind of towards the back, about the fourth row from the very back. There was probably about 10 or 12 rows. It was a pretty big crowd. And John was talking about going meta, blah, 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 meta to the whatever process. And then he was kind of asking questions and stuff, and I raised my hand. And I go, well, what's the meta to the meta? And he went, what? And the whole classroom, like every single person turned around and stared at me. And I felt so uncomfortable, like, oh. And I literally go, oh, I am so sorry. I didn't mean to ask that question. And John's like, no, Mike, that is a really brilliant question. What I did, as a Heyoka will do, is I literally popped everyone out of their left brain and popped them into a wide open right brain. Now, I was in a goofy mood. I was being playful. Now, the one thing with John is I could banter with him and I could be playful with him during the class. But this was like the big NLP trainers training, and all these people were there. It was very important. And the minute it came out of my mouth, because I was in a goofy mood, even the person sitting next to me I was goofing around with. But one thing you learn about playfulness and happiness is it opens you up to your right brain. So constantly being serious and being focused and following the rules, like you won't find the answers in the left brain. Because the left brain focuses on one piece of the puzzle at a time. It doesn't have the ability to amalgamate. Amalgamate is you go to the right brain and you can connect the pieces. You can take 2, 3, 4 or more pieces and see how they connect. That's a right brain function. So if you stay loose, if you stay relaxed, you can do this. It's the same reason why in boxing, kickboxing, fight sports, they're always saying, hey, shake it off, shake your arm, breathe deep, stay loose. Because if you stay loose, your brain can see all the pieces of the puzzle and you can put them together and you can pick the guy apart. So yes, if you learn how to let go while in combat sports, it's really hard because most people in combat sports, they hold it tight, stay focused, stay left brain, step 1, step 2. But if you can allow yourself to just let go, all of a sudden you see the bigger picture, and man, does it give you a major advantage. Now I'm going to give you an example. I'm so comfortable doing this, and I've done it's like this is my everyday way of being with people. This is just the way I talk. So we had Thanksgiving at my brother-in-law and sister's house in Fairfield, California. This was 20 plus years ago. And what happened was my brother Charlie, me, him, and I think my brother-in-law, we were in the garage. And he was talking about something, and he was kind of stuck and frustrated, like, well, what's your purpose for sharing this? And he goes, well, blah, blah. And I'm like, well, what's your purpose for that? And then I went into a questioning pattern, which I'm not going to do now, but it's like, well, what would happen if you did? He goes, well, blah, blah, blah. I go, well, what would happen if you didn't? He goes, well, that would suck. I mean, blah, blah, blah. I go, what wouldn't happen if you didn't? And he just, you could see his mind expand through the roof outside of the garage. I mean, it just went way out there. And what happened was he went into a deep trance. So he literally was just looking down, left, right. And this was what we call a transderivational search. He was bringing up memories from past, all the way back to childhood. And he was reevaluating everything. And after about 5 minutes, my brother was like, Charlie, what's going on? And I go, no, this is good. He's going through a process right now. It's an unconscious trance that's allowing him to regather information and look at it from a completely wildly different perspective so he can learn what he needs to learn. So he literally walked into the other room, and I think I went back into the kitchen, grabbed some food, and I came back out because I kind of thought it'd be important to attend to him while he's in this trance. And he came out with a solution to a problem, with a issue that he's had since childhood. And he went in, well, first he explained it to me, and then he went inside and talked to the person he had the issue with since childhood, and they had the most amazing conversation for the first time in probably 20 some years. Now, why do you think narcissists are always trying to attack you and hurt you emotionally? I know what they tell you. Oh, it's because they're trying to drain your energy. They're trying to do... Yeah, that's not the purpose, though. The purpose is to keep you from amalgamating, from putting the pieces together. Because they know that you are on a higher level. Empaths are very... I was going to ask you, who do you think is a right-brained person, empath or narcissist? Well, it's an empath. Empaths are very high-level people that function on a much higher level. The average person can't even process the way they process. You are the person who frees people from their mind, frees people from their mental blocks. Beliefs are prison cells. If a belief holds you back, it puts you in jail. It puts you into a stuck state. Beliefs should support you. So if your beliefs do not support you, you need to change that belief. And that's one of the tools that we have. We have a technique called belief change, along with reframing, etc., etc., etc. So the reason why narcissists constantly hurt you is they want you to close off from your emotions and your feelings, because then it dissociates you. Now you feel like you're not connected to God. You're not. Food is bland. Life is black and white. It's like you're in this dark tunnel, and everything sucks. You just like you lose the color, the life, and the zest and the flavor of life. You lose the passion. You lose the happiness. You lose the joy. So what's the purpose of doing that? Just to make you suffer? No. It's to keep you from opening up to the right brain, to keep you from opening up to the amalgamation, the ability to put the pieces together at the drop of a hat without even thinking. Because this is what will free mankind. That's what this battle is all about. That's what's going on in the world right now. So on the one hand, the left was going to hire another, I don't remember, I'm going to make up a number, but another 300 or 800 IRS agents, or maybe it was 3,000, to investigate you, right? And then the new elected officials come into office and they brought this thing in called DOGE that began to investigate those that are in power, saying, hey, where did all our money go? And now all of a sudden they're saying, no, this isn't right. Do you really want someone to do this? Do you really want someone to investigate into your financial matters? And like, well, yeah, that's what you were going to do with the brand new 3,000, or I don't know what the number is, but so many new agents. Oh, I was way off. It was 80,000. So remember, the same people terrified of DOGE wanted to hire 80,000 additional IRS agents to audit you. They're now saying, do you really want these people in your business? And it's like, well, that's what you were going to do. See, they don't want you to connect the pieces together. They don't want you to bring them side by side. They only want you to be able to see one thing at a time. And this is why they want you in a constant state of fear, so you're narrow. Like looking at a scope, looking at a very small 1-inch dot on a target. They don't want you to see the bigger picture, because then it'll free mankind. So they constantly hurt you because they don't want you to feel. The last video I was talking about was all about feeling. No thinking, you just feel everything. And that's how you make it make sense. When you're feeling, you're in your right brain. You are in the bigger picture brain that can see all the pieces of the puzzle at once and can start connecting the dots, connecting the pieces together. And then you're like, hey, wait a minute. This isn't fair. This isn't right. They don't want you to get to that level. So when you become very, very right brain, I've had quite a few experiences with this, and man, you just feel everything. And I mean everything. You feel noises, you feel... you feel energy, you feel vibrations, like you feel thoughts. Talking about being a powerful being, when you access this level of your power, your ability, your everything, you're uncontrollable. Not only are you picking up on the most subtlest of information, of feelings, of emotion, tone, the way they say it, you are completely aware of it, and your brain processes all this information at a much higher rate. You have turned on your supercomputer. So now let's go to the greatest meta of all. One of the things in that conversation that John brought up was, I don't know if he used the word God. I think he did, but maybe not. But The point being is, let's use God, because here's what God did. God was so perfect and pure that there was no contrast, and because there was no contrast, there was no reflection. Because there was no reflection, there was no sense of self, and there was no sense of knowing that you exist. Everything comes from contrast, meaning one of the things to say about angels is angels are already there. They just don't know they're there. They don't even know they exist until they're brought into the 3D, and now they have contrast. The 3D world is all about contrast. If everything is pure positivity and pure light, you don't know that you exist. There's no resistance. There's no nothing. You need resistance in order to hear a guitar string when it's plucked. What that is when it vibrates, vibration is resistance. It is contrast. And that's how you can hear the tone, depending on how fast it's oscillating or vibrating. You can't taste food, you can't taste flavors without resistance, without contrast. That's literally how your taste buds work. You can't feel anything if there's no contrast. If there's no contrast, there's just purity. It's like you can walk right through it and you don't even know you're walking. You don't even know there's a through it. You don't even know it is. You can't even see anything without contrast. You can't just have pure positive electrons. You have to have at least one or more negative sparks, negative electrons, to create contrast. It literally says angels are jealous of mankind because we can feel love. It says in the Bible that God made us higher than the angels. I'm going to get real specific because we have those buffs out there. Okay, so let's start where it says it made us lower. It says, at the present time the angels are greater than we are because God made us a little lower than heavenly beings, Psalm 8:5. But the Bible also says that in heaven we will be higher than the angels. Let me read that psalm off specifically. It says, Psalm 8:5, you have made them a little lower than the angels and crowned them with glory and honor. Now, what it means by lowering is allowing us to come down to the third dimension. It doesn't mean lowering as in status or lowering. It means lowering as in vibration, so you can feel, hear, see, hear, feel, smell, and taste on the third dimension. On this dimension, you can also experience love, pain, and compassion. Being here is not a punishment. It is a reward. It says, and crown them with glory and honor. Humans are very, very, very special to God. Now, during my first awakening when I was 28 years old, at the very, very end, the last lesson, it was 6 months. Okay, this lasted for 6 months. I'm going to make this short because I've shared this a few times already. So the very, very last lesson was there was like nothingness. And I was like, okay, I'm waiting. It's like every night when I'd fall asleep, I'd kind of wake up in this another like it wasn't a classroom, it was just nothingness. Usually something would be painted on the darkness, which I call the chalkboard, which really isn't a chalkboard because there was no chalk, there was no board, there was nothingness. And all of a sudden it drew a rectangle like and it kind of made that noise actually. And then it just sat there for a while. I literally remember going, okay, come on, because I literally was sitting there for like 5 minutes or longer. I'm like, okay, this is like, it usually just kind of popped like symbols, things, pieces. It was always symbolic. So I'm looking at this rectangle. That's all there was, just a white line in this space of darkness, of nothingness. And then all of a sudden, these little white, kind of like the chalk, but little circles with little tracers behind them would go into the rectangle. And right as I started to ask the question, like, what is that? It's like, oh, those are angels that are coming down to earth. It's like the fallen angels. But being a fallen angel is not a bad thing. It's in this case, it's you're falling into the third dimension, just like that movie with Nicolas Cage, because you wanted to experience life. You wanted to experience the feelings and flavors and pleasure. You wanted to feel love. And this is the crowning. It's like a gift. He crowned you with glory and honor. This is like a reward. Now, if you notice, how do narcissists treat you? Like with absolute total dishonor. They run you into the dirt. It's the complete opposite. Now, do you find that to be a coincidence? No, because they are so jealous that God honors you in this way that they want to make you feel like you're nothing. They want to dishonor you. They want to dishonor God, which is the complete opposite of what God's done to you. God has honored you. So the angels, us, we have came down into this earth, into this dimension, and then I was waiting and watching, and then I'm like, well, what's going on? Because it was kind of plain, just like a rectangle with a couple little angels or little white streaks going into the rectangle, and it stopped. I'm like, yeah, okay, well, what else? And then on the very far left-hand corner, without me looking, it's all the way down to the left beneath me. It came up to the bottom left corner of the rectangle, and this little, and I knew it was a negative spark. I thought, oh, what is this going to do? And the minute it hit that corner, it was like a pop. It's kind of like when you light a match, like that, and literally it made like this kind of I don't know if the word is like dominoes when they fall down, like all the way across. And all of a sudden there was light, color, sound, flavor, smells, emotions, feelings. All of a sudden I realized, like, oh wait, this is the left side of the rectangle is the alpha, the right side is the omega, the beginning and the ending. This is the 3D world. That negative spark created contrast, and that's what allows you to see, hear, feel, smell, and taste life. That concept is really, really important. Now, there's something that we call parts in NLP. In energy healing, we call them electric charges, or we call them crystallizations. We were never meant to have separated parts. That's sin. Now, when I say separated parts is sin, I don't mean like God's punishing you. It just means a little part of you was pushed out, little bulb. Let's say you're like a glass of water, and that's all of you, 100%. You're one, whole, and complete, just like the ocean, right? Well, when something scary happened when you were a little kid, the core you took a little droplet and pushed it outside of the core you and said, you deal with it. Now, that little part begins to develop its own rules, structure, values, beliefs, and strategies on how to deal with things. But the problem is it's a little child. And most of your parts started when you were a little child. I'm talking like even before you were born, when you're in the womb, during the birth. You know, the first day, the third day, like these little parts start getting created, and all of a sudden you got a bunch of parts pulling you left and right and up and down. And a lot of them are very, very scared. They're terrified and they're in a panic. And as an adult, it can kind of pull you in 10 different directions at once, and you're like, whoa, like, this, it freaks you out, and you're like, well, how can I function if this is going on? So what we want to do is we want to heal each part, and then we want to do a technique called parts integration to bring that part back into you, or back into that whole glass of fluid or emotions of what you are, energy. And then it becomes one, like when you drop a drop of water in the ocean. It's not like a separate drop is floating around. No, it becomes one with the ocean. So the Heyoka and me, during the seminar, we're talking about this, and we're talking about integrating these parts, or in energy healing we call it clearings, where the charge begins to dissolve, or the crystallization begins to melt, kind of like salt or sugar candy. If you put it in hot water, eventually the sugar just melts and disperses, right? And all of a sudden the crystallization is gone, and now there's just one fluid. Now you have oneness. This is atonement. There's no separation. It's literally like taking grains of salt or grains of sand and putting it in warm water and then swirling that around. Eventually they're all going to disperse and melt, and they're going to become at one. They're going to dissolve. And this is essentially what we do when we heal parts and we integrate them. They begin to dissolve, and the energy, see, your energy comes back into you, and now you begin to become a little bit more solid, a little bit more grounded, and a little bit more strong. So John was talking about parts integration, which we'd already learned during the practitioner course, etc., etc. We knew what it was, but he was taking it to a much more vague and abstract level. And he's like, hey, you got to understand, like, you begin to integrate all these parts, and what happened was he was talking about how God created a separate part so we could have an idea of who God was. It's kind of like looking back at yourself. Without having contrast, you don't even know you exist, and that's where the angels are at right now. Contrast gives you existence, even though God or the angels exist right now. They're there. They just don't have any contrast where they're at. And I hope you're understanding what I'm trying to say. There's no resistance, therefore there's no feeling. There's no sense of self. There's no sense of anything. So God created another part so he could have a reflection of himself. So he could begin to experience himself. And then God created a bunch of parts, which is all of us. One of the theories is that God is literally living through us, the pain, the pleasure, the happiness, the joy, the sorrow, the suffering, because God wanted to experience life in all these different ways. So we are all a part of God. So here I was sitting in this class, he was talking about now we're integrating more and more of our parts and we become more and more solid, and you have less conflict, which is kind of the interesting thing. So all of a sudden setting goals and achieving them becomes easier and easier and easier. It becomes a lot smoother. So you know how you have this tug of war, like a part of you wants to do this, but another part doesn't want to do it, or a part of you wants to go here. Like some people would literally say, well, a part of me wants to go to the movies, but another part of me wants to go to the party, which is at the same time. So you have this, what we call parts conflict. So here John is up on stage talking about this and talking about integration, how it makes it smoother and smoother. And then I said, well, what would happen if you integrated all your parts? And again, everyone stopped and went, like had this gasp, and they turned around and they looked at me like no one had ever thought of that. And he goes, well, believe it or not, but there's an actual answer to that. I'm like, yeah, what's that? He goes, you wouldn't exist in this dimension. You would pop out of the third dimension. Essentially, you would disappear because you have no contrast. To live on this dimension, you have to have contrast, at least one separate part that is kind of the opposite of you or the reverse of you. This is why they say your enemies are your greatest teachers. Or they can be if you're willing to learn from the lessons that were put forth. One of the possibilities, if you completely integrate all of your parts, you go back into God and you become one with God. Now you might think, you're like, so I don't exist? Like, no, it's not quite like that. When parts integrate with you, one of their fears is, and they do fear and they will fight you for a while, and then they'll finally let go, is they don't disappear. They gain a greater awareness with you as one. So it's not like suddenly, God, how to explain this? They do disappear because eventually they realize, like, oh, wait a minute, I'm actually a part of the greater whole. I'm not actually an actual individual here, right? And once it integrates, it's like, oh, now I have this greater awareness, and it's at oneness. There's no you and it, okay? It's one with you. And I don't mean there's a separateness, there's literally one, so it becomes you and has a greater awareness, as do you. So what happens if all these parts begin to integrate more and more and more, and then we begin to become at one with ourselves and pop into God, and God becomes one with us, or we become one with God? Well, then there's nothingness once again. By the way, the sleeping angels that are there, they exist. They're about to be awakened. God bless you guys. I hope you enjoyed this video. I told you it was going to be an extremely vague and abstract video. There was a purpose and is a purpose for this. It is a huge story, metaphor for your brain to begin this process. I have a very strong feeling your entire nervous system, your parts, the core you, are going to begin to look at each other and look at life and look at the universe in a much, much, much different way, from a completely different perspective. God bless you guys. Let me know if this this video kind of was a brain twister. I'd love to hear what you guys think about what you just heard. Alright, God bless you guys. If you enjoyed this video, please click subscribe, click the like button, go ahead and make a comment, and if you want, you can go ahead and make a donation. There's a PayPal link right there in the description box. God bless you guys. I'll see you in the next video. Bye.